Okay, good morning, Stuart. I'd like to introduce everybody to Stuart White.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. I'd like to introduce everybody to Stuart White, who's a senior partner at the Eames Partnership, and we're going to talk about executive search and general recruitment matters. Hello, Stuart. How are you?
Good morning. Good afternoon from here. I'm very well. How are you today?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. We had a few technical difficulties on our first take of this, but we are going to persevere and carry on. So thank you very much for your patience, Stuart. Now,
It's a pleasure.
Great. Now, I do like to start these things by asking people something that the general population doesn't know. So, Stuart, I gave you a heads up on this one. Please tell us something that people don't know about you.
Yeah, so it was some years ago, to be honest with you, but I was mistaken in a Chinese restaurant for Curly Watts off EastEnders.
Actually, a point of order, I believe he was on Coronation Street, which for anybody not from the UK,
Was he?
Yes, it was definitely Coronation Street.
I thought he was married to Sharon Watts.
It was Raquel Watts, I believe, who later became the barmaid of Coronation Street. Not that I'm a big fan of either soap opera, but yes, I believe, just as a point of order. But either way, high praise indeed. And who was it? Was it a waiter or another diner?
No, it was a punter. It was a couple of guys who were in there, well, anyway, I think if any of your listeners would like to write in with the answer, if it's Coronation Street or EastEnders, that'd be a good way to go, I think.
Well, yes, absolutely. Now, moving on from Curly Watts, would you be able to tell us, please, something a little bit about the Eames Partnership and your role there?
Yeah, certainly. So Eames Partnership is a specialist insurance and reinsurance executive search firm. We're headquartered in London, but we have offices in Hong Kong, Singapore and Zurich. And we focus on what we call the specialty lines markets across the global insurance hubs. And specialty lines is nothing particular. It's just large, complex risks that tend to find themselves either into London, Singapore, New York or Bermuda. And that can be anything from airlines to satellite to large global construction projects and so on.
Right, I see. Excellent. And how would you say executive search? What does it mean to you personally? I mean, what is your role? What do you? Yeah, your ethos of it all.
Yeah. So I personally focus on senior brokers and underwriters across the various markets. And what it means to me is we tend to be called in when a client either doesn't have the time to find and fulfill a particular need that they have, or they want to put a third party in between that process and they want to remain anonymous, or it's something that they simply can't do themselves. And that's when our services become appropriate.
Right. So obviously you've worked hard to get as many contacts as you no doubt have. But how long would you say you're dedicated to finding and filling a position? I mean, what sort of timescales are we looking? I mean, I assume it's role dependent, really, but in general, what would you say?
Yeah. I mean, we already have a very strong network that's been built up over many years. But I guess on average, from start to finish, it would take about 8 weeks from a client assigning us to a particular brief to us finding and that individual or team being offered positions within that organisation. Right.
So it really is no small undertaking at all. That's it's a lot of work. And do you have? I mean, how does it work at Eames? Do you have teams of researchers who are constantly keeping files up to date to try and lessen that time period, or do you just go out looking specifically per position as it lands on your desk?
So we have a specific research team that works with us, and they will spend their days looking at particular areas of the market. And keeping our what we call market maps up to date. So we work very closely with them. Each assignment, although two different clients could be asking for the same things, the cultural fit could be completely different. So having conducted, say, a search in the marine cargo market on behalf of one client doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to fit for another client. So we have to not necessarily start the process again, but we have to rethink it through a different lens.
Right, I see. So your research team is obviously extremely important to your business.
Extremely, yeah. Because it's not just a question of where people have been, how much experience they've got, and so on. It's how they're perceived in the market. The insurance market in London is particularly close knit, and people know each other well. And you find people who are brilliant at what they do, fantastic operators, fantastic producers, but really not particularly good team players. That doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means that they're not necessarily the right fit for everybody.
Right, I see. So something of a challenge for you guys to place them if they come looking for you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
Talking of players in the market, how did you get into the market yourself? The executive search.
So I was a Lloyd's broker for 10 years, which was enjoyable and fun and a great learning platform for me. But it just got to a point where I wanted slightly more control over my earnings and my destiny. And I started to look around for something else to do and stumbled across a company that was looking for an individual to set up an insurance recruitment desk for them. Applied, was offered the job, and that was over 22, 23 years ago now.
Wow. And we'll talk about what's happened subsequently and from that point, but is there anything you miss about that? Any regrets about leaving that and your choices you made?
No, I don't think so. It gave me what I was looking for at the time, and still does. I find it fulfilling, and I'm still very active in the market that I'd left. I'm just on the outside looking in rather than on the inside looking out now.
Right, and so you're obviously in touch with your old colleagues from that time.
I am, yeah.
And are they your clients now? I guess they're quite senior now.
Some of them are, yeah.
Excellent.
The circle of life.
Sorry, say again?
The circle of life.
Yes, absolutely, quite. And tell me, so when you made that transition, I'm guessing at this point that there are certain similarities, certain skill sets that are required for both executive search and Lloyd's broking. But did you take to executive search immediately, and you went straight in and all guns blazing, or were there a few transitional hiccups along the way, would you say, that you now know the difference?
It was a slow start, certainly, right. Because you have to build your desk, you have to build your reputation. Back then, when I joined, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have the data that's available to you now. It was a question of, you had a desk, you had a phone, you had a phone directory, and you had whatever you'd built up contact-wise yourself. So it was a question of getting out there, cold calling, getting in front of people, pitching to them, and picking up any vacancy that you possibly could, and then working on it. So it wasn't easy, but I never thought I couldn't do it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it from the word go, and still do.
Right, so this was 22, 23 years ago, so you would have been about 16 or 17 then, I guess.
Something like that.
Right. No, but I mean, joking apart, when you're when you're making these cold calls you mentioned, and you're clearly a young guy, I mean, was that an issue, that a credibility issue, or I mean, if so, how did you overcome that? And if not,
it was at some point, because I would try and pitch for senior roles, and with hindsight, you don't have that credibility, and people don't take you seriously when you're younger. You don't have the experience, you don't have the network that you need, and it's something that I tell my young guys, of course you should aim high, but don't go and see a CEO when you're 24 and ask him to give you the mandate to find his new COO for a multinational company, because it's unlikely to happen. But back then, when I first started, I was working on vacancies paying 25 to 60k on average. So it was a much lower level, and then you just build it up from there.
Right. Okay, so I mean that this might be you might just have just answered the next question, but having been in the industry the best part of a quarter of a century, what advice would today's Stuart White give 25 years ago Stuart White about his career path and what he should be trying to do and how he should be trying to do it?
Yeah, it's all about building relationships. I mean, spot trading will only get you so far, and trying to earn a fast buck will only get you so far. And if you do want to make a decent living out of recruitment or headhunting, it's important that you build long-standing, sustainable relationships with your clients, and that you let them know that you're there for them through the good times and the bad times, and you stick with them.
Right. So yeah, a distinct partnership basically is what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. And is there anything about the job, would you say, that, or the industry that would keep you up at night beyond just the general day-to-day running of a fairly major organisation as you do?
Yeah, I mean, you constantly have to generate income, and that goes with the territory. So it doesn't matter what you did yesterday. It's what you're going to do today and what you're going to do tomorrow that counts. And there are plenty of people who dine out on a substantial deal they've done for months on end, but have absolutely no pipeline, and then come unstuck. But more importantly, it's what keeps me awake is can I stay relevant? It's a fast-moving, young market. Data changes hands at alarming rates. The global markets change very rapidly. There are new ways of doing business. There's digitalisation coming in, and it's keeping abreast of that and keeping abreast of the new skill sets that brings to the insurance markets, and making sure that you are in touch with that, and you understand what your clients' needs are today and what they're going to be in the future.
Right, and how would you say your clients' needs have changed in the last 20 odd years? Have you noticed any departures, any principal departures from what they're looking for?
Well, I think that the most dramatic changes have really come relatively recently. I mean, the Lloyd's insurance market is always seen as quite old-fashioned, and it's always rejected any type of digitalisation and change from that point of view. And still to this day, well, despite COVID, or before COVID, you have brokers walking around the market with a leather slipcase with a load of paper in it, finding underwriters to present risk to, and that is changing dramatically.
Right.
And actually, it's come at the perfect time, because everybody's stuck at home working from home. Everything has to be done digitally now, and we've seen people who, and this is where it's become really clear which clients or which underwriters and brokers have invested heavily in IT and which haven't, and those that haven't are now struggling to keep up with the change that we're going through.
Right, so you'll see some, or you'd imagine you'll see some fallout here, and people leaving the market, just because they can't keep up. Okay, that's interesting. And what would you say? Just get back to you now. What would you say has been your worst experience to date of the industry? Don't worry, we'll get to the good bit later after this.
Yeah, thank you. Probably waking up one morning to find that the company I was working for had gone into liquidation overnight. That was a pretty grim and dark couple of weeks. That was some years ago. It was the company I worked for before I joined the Eames Partnership. But it was not a particularly pleasant experience, but something that you learn from.
Yes. Okay.
Or learn through, I should say.
Right. Well, yes. So what actually happened there? Was it just squeezed out of business?
So I worked for a larger company called Alexander Mann, and the executive search part of that, Alexander Mann Financial Markets, separated from the broader group, and we were bought out by a small AIM-listed PLC called Hatpin, and they borrowed £10 million from Kaupthing Bank in Iceland to buy us. And then almost exactly a year to the date since that deal went through, Iceland went pop. Kaupthing called in their loan, and that resulted in Hatpin going into liquidation and subsequently us as well.
Right, so totally unrelated.
It was quite shocking.
Well, yes, I'd imagine, but a totally unrelated event just pulled the rug from under your feet.
Yes, exactly. And so the day it happened, myself and my fellow directors were called up to London to see our lawyers. And the first thing they told us was that as directors of the company, we would also be liable for any debts that were incurred. Wow. So that was an eye opener.
That would have kept you up at night, I'm sure.
Well, I haven't been a listed director at Companies House since, and that's the reason why.
Well, lessons learned.
So,
God.
But it had a happy ending in the fact that a white knight came along and bailed us out.
Oh, that's great. And to counteract that, then, what's been your best experience in executive search? Did it outweigh the worst experience?
Yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't still be doing it. But the best experience has been quite recently. So we were fortunate enough to work with a new startup broker of quite some significance in the London market. And we were involved from a very embryonic stage. So a very well-known global CEO who had been in the garden or was in the garden contacted me and asked me to go and see him. And he outlined his plans for this new broker and asked me if I would look after the talent piece of that. And that was 3 years. It would be 3 years ago in January that conversation took place. And so while he was busy raising money, I was busy looking at top quartile talent across the broking London market. Capital was raised $750 million from Warburg Pincus, and the company officially launched in May 2019. And then we quickly scaled that up to 220, 230 staff in fairly short order. And we've continued that growth in London during 2020, and we're now building out their US platform in New York. Nice. So it's been a tremendous opportunity to work with a startup of that. Well, firstly, that caliber, the caliber of the individuals concerned, the caliber of the capital involved, and to watch it come to life. And it was the largest startup in the UK in 2019. So not insignificant, and British, which is lovely to see.
That's quite amazing. And do you have any idea at the moment how many people globally they're looking to recruit in total?
Well, they're ambitious. So I think we're probably up to 70 now in London, and we have we're adding new lines of business to that for them. The initial conversations, and this was pre-COVID, was that the US was going to be bigger than London. We're cautiously going into the US as we speak. So we have a mandate to find about 90 people within the first quarter of 2021. So we're busy putting that together, but I can see that ramping up quite quickly.
Wow, amazing! And Eames Partnership has placed every single employee of this brokerage?
95% of them.
Wow.
95% of them.
Amazing,
yeah.
Amazing. And obviously...
Yeah, it's been a great...
Sorry?
I just said it's been a great opportunity to work on.
Yeah, well, of course. And I know you have broad shoulders, but how many people did you have working on this within Eames?
It's myself and my research team. So there was 4.5/5.
Wow, that's an awful lot of work.
We pedalled very, very, very hard.
I'm sure.
And are still pedaling hard.
Although 2020 has been the year of COVID and, at least in Europe, Brexit, how has this changed things for your industry, for Eames specifically, and has it changed anything for you specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's affected everyone in certain ways. In some cases, many ways. For us, it's been generally good. We had some fairly large legacy projects that we were working on as we went into COVID, and actually right at the beginning of COVID, we won a big project as well, which kept us busy. But a number of insurance companies, a number of brokers have private equity backing, and when you go into something like a pandemic, they protect their money, and whereas back in March there would have been money set aside for investment opportunity and growth and so on, that began to peter out, and so we had a very strong trading year. We started to see things dip in quarter 3, and then in quarter 4 we've seen things pick up again. And as we go into 2021, the investment is definitely back on the table, and people are ready to trade forward. So definitely a dip towards the end of the year, not a significant one, but a noticeable one. But we've come out the other side of that, and the clients that we work with are keen to go into 2021 very positively.
I see. And that dip, would you say that's more COVID related, or was it over the uncertainty of Brexit? Because I assume your personal principal focus is the UK, is it, or is it a global thing for you?
No, it's principally in the UK.
Right.
It's what's on our doorstep.
Right.
But I'd say it was principally COVID related.
Right.
Brexit's been looming for a while, and I guess people have had their plenty of time to get their head around that and to work out what they're going to do. So I'd say it was principally COVID related. Right.
And in terms of your industry, obviously we know it's an industry of personal contacts, personal relationships, and trust. Not being able to meet your clients face to face, is this having an impact on your work? And negative or positive, or none at all?
Well, it's different, and of course, when you're face to face with somebody, you know how hard to push or how hard not to push. You pick up on certain things that you don't necessarily get on a Zoom or a Teams call, but that is the way of the world, and we've had plenty of client meetings on Zoom and Teams. We've won plenty of business off the back of those calls. Obviously, we'd rather be face-to-face with clients. Everybody would. It's a much more personal experience. But this is the new way of working. And I very much doubt that I'll be going back to 5 days in London anytime soon, if at all. So this is the way we will be communicating.
So these changes are here to stay. So the clients like it. And I guess for you, it's less time travelling, which is a bonus. But and if there's no particular downside, why not? I guess,
Yeah, and it comes back to the situation of who's invested in their technology over the years and who hasn't. And we're going to give notice. We can give notice on our lease on our office building in March, which we'll do. We'll serve out 6 months' notice. And then we'll move to a far more flexible working environment where you book your desk for the day or for the half day. And I can see myself coming up to London 2 or 3 times a week and working from home 2 or 3 times a week. And that will be the way we'll work going forward, I'm pretty sure of.
Wow. That's a significant change. And I assume prior to COVID, that wouldn't even have been thought of.
Not in the way that, I think a lot of progressive companies were working towards home working to a certain degree, but that's like working from home one day a week and offering that sort of flexibility. But nothing like this. And it has proved that it's worked. It can work. And it's proved that you don't necessarily need to be, you don't need to be in an office between 8 o'clock and 6 o'clock every day, 5 days a week. There's many things that you can do as well, if not better, from home.
Well, that is interesting. I mean, to hear you say that now, I couldn't have imagined that 2 years ago. That anybody in your position would have said that. It's really quite extraordinary what's been going on. Yeah,
I mean, I think we're going to see a swing the other way because we're all locked down. And just haven't had the human contact with our co-workers. And if you think that you spend more hours with your co-workers than you do with your family, that's quite a strong shift. When we come out of COVID, I think there'll be a massive desire, and there already is from the youngsters that work for us and for many companies, to be back in an office environment. It's far more fun than being stuck at home if you live with your parents or if you live in a small flat.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see a shift with everybody really keen to come back to London, and then it will settle down to this 2 to 3 day a week pattern.
Right. Oh, well, I mean, from my point of view, I can see the advantage to that. Yeah, the mix. The devil's in the detail, and the work-life balance, and it makes sense. Yeah. And the amount of hours saved not commuting, because let's face it, hardly anybody lives in central London anymore. Unless you're, some billionaire. So yes, it's just you alone. It's going to save hours each week that you can use productively or otherwise.
Yeah, and it working like this makes your day far more efficient. You have meeting call after call after call booked in. You don't have to go and find people. You don't have to travel to get to them. It's just one call after another. It's a little bit soulless from that point of view, which is why spending 2 or 3 days per week in London makes a lot of sense, because that's the time to get in front of the people you need to see, whether that's clients or candidates in my industry or whoever it may be. But with the flexibility to do your admin type work from home.
Right, and the younger guys in your team. Do they are they as motivated as they were when you were there, metaphorically cracking the whip in the office? There's an awful lot more self-responsibility required, I assume, if they're working from home.
There is, yeah. I mean, we're very project orientated. We have deadlines that we all have to meet. So we have a morning call either once a day or every other day, depending on what we're doing. So everybody is clear of their objectives and what they need to do, and we haven't seen any issues with that. So no, so far from a motivational point of view.
You've obviously hired well. Then
work quite well.
You've hired well.
Well, yeah, we look after our staff. I suppose for a lot of companies at the moment, and we were moving towards this world as well. There's a huge amount of emphasis put on mental health and well-being, and it's making sure that it's not everybody wants to sit in their bedroom day in, day out. Nobody does, in fact, and mental health is an important part of that, and well-being is an important part of that, and it's trying to make sure that people are all right. It's easier to spot when you're in the office every day than it is when you're just looking at somebody on a screen.
Yes, no, quite. And just going back to Brexit and the impact it's had on business, or as you say, it hasn't really had too much impact. I note that you don't have an office in the EU, but you do have an office in Switzerland, and you obviously got your office in London, or your physical presence, as it will be come March. Have you got any plans to set up in the EU at all? Because obviously there are stories constantly, whether it be insurance or finance, of people setting up, if not representative offices, regulatory required offices in the EU. Is that something that's likely to happen for you guys?
If we feel it's necessary, yes. So pre-Brexit, we've always managed to work the European markets from London. Mm-hmm. And the European markets for us are really Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and the Netherlands, mm-hmm. and mainly France and Germany within those 5 territories. So what we've seen historically, and this is why we have an office in Singapore. So if you go back a number of years, a considerable amount of Asian specialty lines business was broked and underwritten in London, and then Singapore became the Asian hub, and so you've got many number of Lloyd's syndicates and Lloyd's brokers who have offices in Singapore. So all of that Asian business comes into Singapore and is underwritten domestically without the need for it to come to London, and they have their own market in its own right, so they have the right skill sets to do that with very little referral to London. Europe will go the same way. The difference for us is that it's difficult to say where the key hub is going to be, because a number of people already had existing offices in, say France or Germany. Those that didn't have been setting up in Belgium or Dublin or Luxembourg. And we can't, we're only a small boutique firm, so we can't have offices in all of those hubs. So we're sort of watching and waiting to see where people go and where the activity happens. But a lot of them are just brass plaques, as we know. So if you think about, say, a large European construction project that's being put up, the underwriting decision will still be made in London, where it's physically agreed and the underwriting stamp goes down. Could be in Dublin, could be in Brussels, could be anywhere. But the underwriting decision and the brains and the thought process behind it will still be done in London for the foreseeable future.
Right. So
because that's where the knowledge base is.
Right, of course. So no great incentive for you to set up shop all around Europe.
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, and just globally for Eames, then the focus will stay with Singapore and the UK, pretty much in terms of physical presence. Yeah, you don't see.
Yeah, I mean our next office.
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Sorry, I missed that, Mike.
No, I was going to say. So, do you not see any growth areas beyond that you guys can capitalise on? I mean, the States you mentioned before.
Yeah, I mean, our next office. Yeah, so that is absolutely where our next office will be. It will be in New York.
Right.
So we're active in the US market. We're very active in the US market at the moment, but we need boots on the ground, and we need an established office in New York.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but and that, do you imagine that'll be the limit for the rest of your career, or do you see anything else on in the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to potentially somewhere in Europe if we see that there's a specific hub. So Singapore it is the Asian hub. And so it makes perfect sense to have an office there. We don't know where the European hub is going to be, if there will be a singular European hub at all. So that's something. It's a watching brief for us. New York definitely, and then if you think about Australia, that's certainly something that can be handled out of our Asian offices. Bermuda is another massive insurance and reinsurance hub, but again, I think. That's something that we could probably handle from New York.
Right. Yeah. I see. So basically the plan is to stay nimble, but commit as and when there's a definite need.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, because we've stuck to our knitting of insurance and reinsurance, there are only so many key territories where you need to be. I suppose, actually thinking about it, Brazil is proving to be a very interesting up and coming market. But then everybody said that about China 10 years ago, and we still see very little flow of business out of mainland China. It's a long haul. Building relationships in somewhere like China takes time and effort and money, and you see very, very little return for a great number of years.
Right.
That's a well-trodden path in certainly the insurance and reinsurance industry. Brazil, is open for business and is growing. But again, it's a very, very different way of doing business. You've got to have people on the ground who understand that and act as a go-between.
Yes. Which actually is this leads me to the thought I had. What are the cultural differences, would you say, in the different geographical locations for your work? The industry's work. I mean, are there any notable differences, say, between Singapore and New York, or London and Bermuda in the way business is approached?
Yeah, I mean, Singaporeans are very open to do business, as are people in Hong Kong, as you will remember and know. They are in New York, but you've got to really prove yourself in New York that you are capable and able. I mean, it's interesting. So I've had several trips to New York to look at the market out there and to look at what our competition looks like, who's on the ground, but also spent time talking to clients that we deal with in London, who obviously are either American companies or have offices obviously in New York and across the States. And so I could be dealing with the CEO of a global broker in London and drop his name in conversation in New York, and nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's London, buddy. This is New York.
Yes.
This is North America. This is a huge market.
Yeah.
So who and how many years of experience is kind of almost irrelevant. It's like, well, what can you do for me today?
Mm-hmm.
What can you bring me? How can you help me? So we've got that to deal with. But what's great is there aren't that many people doing what we do in the US. And there could be a very good reason behind that. But because we're working on this new startup, it's the perfect opportunity for us to springboard the brand into the US market.
Yeah, get your foot in the door. Yes, no, yeah. Interesting. And regarding the expansion plans, is there any company ethos within Eames for how you apportion staffing levels to these new ventures, these new areas? Did you tend to hire from within and train your staff to assume the responsibility, or do you go out to the market and hire from your competition generally when you're expanding into these new areas?
It's both. So all of our global offices have generally been populated by somebody from London who's wanted to work abroad, and that is always a preference, but not always realistic or practical. So, and actually finding good people to work in our industry is hard. It's surprisingly hard, right, considering that's what we do for a living. Yes. Trying to find people who are good and fit what we do is hard. We work in a relatively niche market. Although insurance is a massive global entity, our part of it is really quite niche. And finding good people who do what we do is difficult. I think we know who they are now anyway, and they're either not interested in us or we're not interested in them. So we do have a thorough training program as well for people who, and what we quite like to do is take people from industry, people who've either been brokers or underwriters like me, who feel that they're stuck in a bigger machine, and had the same frustrations that I had, and are looking for a way to use their knowledge and skills.
Yes, no, I can see it's a fairly easy progression mentally to make. That you know the market, you know the personnel. Then why not capitalise on it financially and those skills? Yeah, it's interesting.
And interestingly enough, we've got a lady joining my team next week, and we've taken her. She's a journalist and writes in a very well-known insurance publication, and she just came to a career crossroads. She has great network, great black book of contacts, knows the market, has great technical skills, is used to facing off to CEOs and CFOs and COOs globally, and we think she's a great fit for us, and she'll bring a completely different skill set to us. I mean, she understands the global macroeconomics of what's going on in the market far better than we do.
Right.
And that's it's just another strength for us.
Right. Well, it sounds like a great hire. And how did you? Sorry, you said she approached you.
So she's somebody we've known for a number of years. The insurance press like to talk to headhunters. They like to because somebody somewhere will be responsible for a mock. Sorry, say that again.
I said you guys know what's going on.
Well, they'll hear a rumour that a senior person or a team is on the move, and then they'll phone around the headhunters that they know and say, "Were you responsible? What happened? Can you give us a can you give us a scoop so that we can go to press early on it?" So we know each other, and we use them as well. If we want something leaked out into the market, then we'll speak to the press. So it's a bit of a two-way street. So she's somebody we've known for a while, and actually somebody we initially flagged this with about 4 years ago and said, look, we think you'd be a really good headhunter. If you come to a career crossroads, come and talk to us. And then she did earlier this year.
Oh, that's great. And if you were to have one thought for anybody watching or listening to this who's interested in this as a career, what one takeaway, if there is one in particular, would you give that viewer or listener about how the industry works, what he would need to do, or she would need to do, and to be successful? What is your thought on that? Well,
you need to understand the industry that you're working in, or for, I should say. It's very hard to be a generalist in what we do and be all things to all men. So you need to specialise in a particular area. And having spent 10 years as a broker before I moved into the search world has been absolutely invaluable. Just knowing the market, knowing the language of the market, the ebbs and flows of the market, and it allows you to empathise with your clients as well. The insurance market has had a pretty tough time of it it's only just come out of it actually, but it was what we call a soft market for 12, 13 years, where it's difficult to make money, there's too much capacity washing around. And it's just having that understanding what your clients want and where they're heading and how you can help them get there. It's not always about just bums on seats. It's once you become good at what you do, you can actually become a true consultant and offer advice and guidance, as well as finding individuals and talent for your clients.
Right.
So that's my thing. That's what I always say. Learn your industry. Take the time to learn your industry so that you can properly talk to your clients, advise them, and understand what it is they're asking you to do at any one time.
Right. So for me then, that sounds like pick your speciality and your particular area very well, because I'm sure there are quite a few dead end areas that you could end up in executive search, right? Where
exactly.
It's just going nowhere.
And I don't know whether you're going to keep this bit in, but I am convinced, having worked in recruitment and executive search for a reasonably long time, that 70 to 80% of people in the industry are not great, and are, they lack substance, they lack understanding, and they're there to make a quick buck. Some do, some don't, but it's a fairly transient industry from that point of view.
Right.
And I think the people and it's actually really not that difficult to make a difference and to stand out.
Yeah.
If you take the time to learn your industry.
Yeah. And add value.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's essentially, yes. Well, I mean, I guess
it's not rocket science.
Right. Yeah. No, I guess that's
which is why I do
it. I guess fundamentally, if you're in the service industry, you have to provide a service. Your clients are not there for your pleasure; you're there for theirs, and that's basically what everybody needs to know. Yeah, that's enlightening. Now, if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, Stuart, how would he or she find you?
Probably the best way is through my LinkedIn profile. So Stuart White at Eames Partnership, and Stuart with a U.
Stuart with a U. All right. Well, that's marvellous. Thank you. It's been a very interesting conversation, and I appreciate your time over this festive period.
It's a pleasure.
No, that's
very
great.
good to speak to you.